design needs fewer managers and needs more people who are deeply invested in the craft.
What is this one piece of non-obvious advice that you would give to any product designer or senior person who wants to start their own venture?
I'd start off by saying don't. One of the ways I've often articulated design, a great design, is the sense that somebody is left with once they're finished using a product.
Hey guys, welcome to the second season of Behind the Screens. Today I have with me Rahul Gonsalves, who heads the design team at PhonePe. Previously, he was a co-founder at Obvious, which was a design studio in India. Rahul has a very strong background in product building at Obvious. He's built and designed products for companies like Swiggy, Flipkart, Myntra, Kotak Securities, Gojek, and many other well-established organizations and design-led companies. With that being said, I genuinely have Rahul here today because I admire the way he's been an entrepreneur at Obvious, the way he's run his company, and how he's always able to bring clarity to everything that he actually does. And that is why I would love to understand and know everything that I can today from him, and I hope I do justice. With that, thank you so much, Rahul, for being here. Really appreciate you taking the time and spending time for everyone in the audience as well.
Thanks Rohan. It's a pleasure to be here out in this lovely setting.
Yeah, it's a lovely setting. Yesterday we had the rains. Today we have the sun.
Yeah.
So I think
you're getting the full range of Bangalore's way.
I'm getting a complete range. Yeah. I'm liking it. I love everything about Bangalore except for the traffic, which I don't think is.
I don't think you're alone in that. It's not an unpopular opinion.
Yeah. All right. With that being said, Rahul, the format is very straightforward.
Yeah.
I'm going to directly jump into the questions.
Yeah.
I want to know that with Obvious being a very boutique and as well as a very product building, well design focused studio, do you have any key insights that you found from Obvious that actually boggled your mind? Maybe some story that you can share.
See, I think when we started Obvious, right, we didn't start Obvious to make a lot of money. We didn't start Obvious to, at the end of our journey, be acquired by a large product company. In fact, I think it's the first acquisition, if I'm not mistaken, of a design studio by a Indian product company, right, in the sort of history of the ecosystem of any meaningful scale, right? I think we started it because the bunch of us who sort of came together, we genuinely enjoyed building for the formats that were coming up, right? So this is, if you rewind now to 2009, 2010, Apple had just about launched the iPhone. Third-party apps were finally allowed on the iPhone. And you had a new form factor. Until then, we were building websites. We were, building web CMS-based websites. But then suddenly you had all of that ability of a PC in your pocket, right? In a small 3-4 inch device that you could carry around. Completely new business models came about, right?
Yeah.
If you think about it, you had like a Meru cabs, right? If you ever
I have
called them. You had your local Chinese restaurant that you would call and be like, bhaiya, like send me kung pao noodles, etc. But an Uber and a Swiggy were only possible because you now had a networked phone in your pocket which had access to your GPS, which had access to the internet, and which could display a complete, interface on it.
Yeah.
Right? So I think the period where we ran our studio, which was roughly 2010 to 2024, right, those 12 or 14 years, that was a really, really interesting time period in the history, I think, of technology, specifically in India, because you went from nobody having a smartphone to, I don't even know what the latest numbers are, but upwards of 600, 700 million people, I believe, have smartphones in this country today.
Yeah.
Right? So I think, like I said, right, you asked me what some of my learnings were.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I found most interesting was that when we started off, we used to think, okay, business is this really bad set of people. They're just trying to, exploit a bunch of people. design has to save the world from business, right? And I think this is a common perception by designers, right? So a lot of designers, when you talk to them, you ask them what they want to do. They're like, oh, I want to go help, save, I don't know, whether it's, work in healthcare, work in, let's say, saving the environment, whatever it is, right? 5 years later, you catch up with them and they're like, Acha, I'm working on the ads team at Meta, right? So there's often a journey that a lot of us go through. I think one of the most interesting things that I think we also learned over the years is that design need not be in opposition to business. In fact, the best design, and this is something that I'll probably come back to through our conversation, right?
Okay.
The best design comes when you work closely with businesses, right? What happens is that if you understand business, if you understand their goals, their, the things that they want to enable, right? You can actually come up with better design that puts, both the end consumer, but also the, organization or company, helps both of them achieve their goals simultaneously. And in context of a studio, I think I have this sort of rough virtuous circle idea that I have, right? Better design, better business, more opportunities, right? And more opportunities allows you to then do better design, right? If you're getting to work with more interesting clients, and I'm sure you guys have seen this as well, there's some clients where you can do great work, and there's some clients where either they don't have the appetite or their business model doesn't allow you to do great work.
Yeah.
But as you start doing better design, as you start understanding businesses better, you get access to better clients, better opportunities, more open-ended problem statements, right? People stop coming to you and being like, I need a landing page tomorrow. And they'll come to you and say, hey, listen, we don't know how to solve this problem. There's a really complicated problem. How do we move, let's say, I noticed you've done some work with JAR, right? How do we get 200, 300 million people in India, right? How do we get them to actually invest and save without necessarily using that language, which is very complex, which is very domain heavy and specific, right? So I think come back to this thesis that design, and if you understand business better as a designer, you actually get to do better design and you open up more and more interesting opportunities for yourself.
Of course, I genuinely admired when you said that designers also need to understand constraints of business, because that is what I feel starts going short. Because as designers, because we have a Figma on our screen, and we have the ability to do something unique, we can go ahead and do anything and everything. But understanding really the viability that is where people fall short. And then when it falls short, they feel like, oh, things are getting misleading, instead of probably understanding that before than after, maybe. With that being said, you, like I've been very vocal to you previously also. I've genuinely admired Obvious a lot in whatever you guys have built and created, right? I want to know, when you got acquired by PhonePe, what made Obvious different in PhonePe's eyes?
I'll go back to that original framing, right? 3 things.
Okay.
Right? We had a deep focus on craft because that's generally something that people enjoy doing, right?
Okay.
At Obvious. I think we also deeply engaged with and worked to understand the business problems that our clients came to us with, right? We didn't just say, okay, we can make this checkout screen look better, right? Or we didn't say, okay, how do we make this landing page or this home page or the home screen of an app look better? We said, okay, what is the problem that you're actually trying to solve, right? So going several steps further and saying, how do we, not just optimize what we have today, but how do we understand the actual problem that you're asking me to solve, right? I'll give you a quick example, right? And I'm sure this is a conversation you've had a lot. Okay. Client comes to you and says, I want a new homepage. Right? A junior designer would say, great, let's do it, right?
Yeah.
Let's go crazy. I saw some amazing shots on like Behance and Dribble. I want to use this cool new animation. There's this nice tool that allows me to use, I don't know, interaction with Rive or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
A slightly, somebody who spent a little bit more time will say, okay, why do you want a new homepage?
Exactly.
right? Is the existing one not good? Sure, maybe it doesn't look the best visually, but what are your business goals at this point in time? Are you, do you have tons of visitors coming? And, are you unable to actually help them understand what your product does? Are you trying to get them to the next step to sign up and try your product, right? Are you trying to compete against a larger player who is doing something at a lower cost to you? Do you have to explain and articulate your value better on the homepage, right? So I think that's the difference between somebody, jumping into a tool and probably producing something great, right? I've seen, I think the benchmark for craft and visual design and quality is constantly improving.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of the automated tools, I'm hesitant to use the word AI, but it's in the air, so we'll just say it. A lot of these things allow people to very, very rapidly produce new artifacts.
Okay.
Right? But first understanding, zooming out and saying, what do we actually need to do here? Right? What is the problem that maybe you already know? But in some cases, your clients or, if you're in a company, your different stakeholders may not actually understand or may not have articulated what that particular problem is.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that's something we always did. We said, okay, hold on. You want to do this, but let's take a minute to look at why you want to do this, right? I think that was one thing that, is really, really important. And that's one thing we consistently practiced at Obvious. I think the third thing, right, is that, sure, let's say that we've done these two steps, right? We've said, somebody's come to us and said, I need a new app. We've said, okay, we're not just going to give you a new app. We're going to figure out why you need it first.
Yeah.
Once you design it, how do you know without taking the effort of building it, right? And building is expensive. You've got all these engineers. It's going to take them 3 months to build a new app, maybe, right? So that's 3 months of time between when you get your designs to when it maybe goes live, right? How can you actually short circuit that time period and actually take that to people and validate whether your solution works or not, right? So rapid prototyping, put testing before you actually build, right? So I'm sure, you follow a sprint, the design sprint process.
Yeah.
But a similar process like that, right? Applied consistently everywhere, where you don't just build the first solution or the second solution that you design, but you take that solution and you put it in front of actual users.
Yeah.
That's something that we consistently did at Obvious. And, I think that's one of the things that you need to actually test your solution with people and not just assume it's the best. And I think this is one area you were telling me that you're looking for unpopular opinions.
Yeah.
But I think one area where designers can do a lot better, right? We hear a lot about empathy.
Yeah.
I think humility is another underrated characteristic for designers.
This is the second time I'm hearing this. Okay.
I think that, as designers, either because we have to sell ourselves, whether it's an agency or whether you're an individual trying to, join a company, you have to say, hey, I'm the best. I know exactly what the solution is. It takes a lot of humility and being comfortable with yourself to say, maybe this engineer knows a solution which is better than mine. Maybe the guy who's actually trying to use my service or who will be a customer of mine, maybe they know what they want better than I do.
Yeah.
Right? And can I actually be open to listening to them in whatever form, right? You either listen through data, you listen through prototyping and testing, you listen through, active ethnographic research by actually going, inhabiting people's lives, looking at how they actually operate, and then, maybe replicating a process that they do.
Yeah.
So we've done that consistently throughout, right? Rather than assume that, hey, listen, I know exactly what I want to do. Let's say that, a few years ago, I think 2016 or 17, we were building a product in the healthcare space.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, hey, listen, I'm a designer, I sit in this comfortable office in central Bangalore. The people I'm building for, the nurses who are sitting in, say, rural India. I remember we went to Batinda, which is outside Punjab somewhere, right? We actually went in and looked at the way that they were operating, right? And we looked at the way that they were doing things. And we said, hey, can we just replicate this could we take what they're doing in an offline manual way and just digitize it? We don't need to come up with some cool, innovative, new solution that we have thought out without, any inputs, but actually observing how they work, looking at the shortcuts that they use to get past the constraints of their systems.
Yeah.
Right? That's something that I think we've consistently done. So you're asking me, like, why did PhonePe choose Obvious versus anybody else, right? I think there are lots of factors, but I think these three contributed a lot, right? So if I were to sum it up, of course, craft, an excellence in craft, for me, that's a baseline. Like, you have to be good at your work.
Of course.
Whether it's your visual design, whether it's your research, whether it's your product thinking, your strategy, whatever it is. A deep understanding and interest in business, right? Now, do you as a designer actually care about the space that you're in? Or, could you be working on healthcare one day and then, jump into a e-commerce company the next day and not really care? Are you deeply motivated by that particular domain, right? And the third thing, like I said, right, is just this humility.
Yeah.
To believe that design, and I've said this a lot, design is too important to leave to designers alone.
Yeah.
Right. Design, like I believe that if you really want to scale design thinking in an organization, the true mark of that, and I think if I'm able to do that at wherever I'm working, right?
Yeah.
I think then I'll be successful. Can I get the person who's answering customer calls, right, to start thinking from a design perspective? How can I solve this person's problem?
Yeah.
Right? What could I do to change the app so that this person doesn't have to call me back again?
Yeah.
Right? How can I help my engineers, the people, let's say I'm working with, my engineering counterparts, understand that, hey, listen, I'm going to spend, a lot more effort, maybe do something slightly different to make sure that speed is a priority.
Yeah.
Right? Because our customers value speed, and they will, that's what actually helps make their life better. Right?
Yeah.
At PhonePe, let's say, if you're using PhonePe to pay your auto driver after a ride, it's raining like it was last night in Bangalore. You don't want the app to take 10 seconds to open, 20 seconds to, make a payment, right? Can you get done in 2 seconds?
Yeah.
Right? That doesn't happen, like that's out of my control as a designer. But if I can scale that understanding to the, tens and hundreds of engineers that I work with, that's when, design really scales across a company.
No, I love the take, and I think the case study that maybe you were talking about with Obvious was simple.
Yeah.
I have read quite a bit about it.
Yeah.
So Rahul, you told me about Obvious and PhonePe and why they acquired you amongst others as compared to others. I want to understand, you must have had a culture at Obvious and the culture at PhonePe must have been different, of course. How did you, when you got acquired, maintain that culture or fight for that culture and not lose it so much the way you want?
I think the good thing is that there was a very high cultural match.
Right? Oh, lovely.
That was something that we were looking for as we were talking to various different people. PhonePe has a similar focus on craft, right? Integrity, right? I think that was very, very important for us. The fact that they made an offer to our entire team, right, was an indication of that, I would say. And I think the fact that in terms of our long-term alignment, we wanted to see how we can create real impact in the country, right, and beyond. So I think I was not so worried about losing culture. Of course, it's a larger organization. We're going from 35, 40 people to, I don't know, 8, 10, whatever, right? Like a several thousand people company.
Yeah.
It is going to be different, but I think at the core, right, that focus on craft, that focus on integrity, focus on impact, those are the exact things that we were doing at Obvious and which we'll continue to do at PhonePe.
Well, that's brilliant. I think I completely understand, maybe, and I come from the similar background like yours, right? So I feel if the cultural match does not exist, I don't think it even makes sense or it would work out in the long run for anyone.
Yeah.
With that being said, I want to go into the next segue, I want to talk a little bit about how designers can be better at business, because that's something that you advocate quite a bit.
Yeah.
And in our conversations, I've seen you post about it and all of that, right? My next question is that, let's say, if a designer is taking a design decision, but it does not impact metrics, does it need to even exist?
Absolutely. I think that, the reason I talk about designers needing to understand business is because I do think there is a gap there, right?
Of course.
Design schools, design community does not either have enough experience or does not talk about being good at business enough. At the same time, there is a huge amount of joy in design, right? And in a lot of the decisions and things that we do. So I'm absolutely not advocating for a completely metrics-driven future for design. I'm saying that business needs to be interleaved and intertwined with design completely. So, I think a good example is Airbnb's new icons, because those are all the rage these days, right? It probably made no sense for somebody to develop a completely new image format. What was it called? Lava, something like that. To create these transparent icons which perform well across devices, etc. But that I'm sure that adds to some inexplicable feeling, right?
Yeah.
For me, one of the ways I've often articulated design, a great design, is the sense that somebody is left with once they've finished using a product, right? So for me, a great design is not necessarily a great website or a checkout flow, but once let's say you order like back in the day, you order a book from Flipkart. It had a very difficult website, to be honest, right? But when you got that book in your hand 3 days later, or these days more likely a smartphone or a TV or whatever it was, right? Geezer, jo bhi bechte, right? The fact that you got it in 2 days or 3 days later, right? Rather than, in an earlier time when it would take 10 or 14 days, I think that's joyful.
Yeah.
Right? And today, of course, you've changed that from 2 days to 20 minutes, more or less.
Yeah. No, I think this inexplicable feeling, and you absolutely love the fact that you said that the joy, because I think that makes the most sense. That is something that I'd remember more than, hey, you know what, I looked at an app and do I even remember the design? I probably wouldn't, but that feeling will always stay.
Yeah.
So Rahul, since we are speaking of metrics, in your perspective and opinion, what are the 3 business metrics that any designer should definitely understand, and how does that impact their day-to-day work?
Sure. So I think of course, metrics differ from each industry to the other, right? Like you said, e-commerce, maybe they sharp focus on the order value, or let's say, transactions, number of orders per day, whatever it is, right? But I think if you zoom out, you want to look at how are your designs performing, regardless of industry, right? You'd want to look at, I think one of the most important things, it's not really a metric, but a system, is just funnels, right? You have step 1 and you have step 5.
Mm-hmm.
How are your customers moving through all of those journeys? Where is there a drop-off? Why is there an excess drop-off here? Is it because of design? Is it because that's the point at which a pricing tier is revealed, right? That's where actually design can use that metric to then go and influence things.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other part is just conversion rates, right? Similar.
Yeah.
It's really important to just go into the nuance of, let's say, conversion rates versus impressions, right? You may be trying to build consideration for a category. Let's say that I was looking at Uber this morning and I realized they do intercity.
Yeah.
Right? Now they're showing me a banner saying, do you want to go to Mysore? I don't want to go to Mysore today, but now I know that Uber goes to Mysore, right? Now, if I judge that strictly on the basis of click-through rates or conversion rates, it would probably perform very, very low. But if I judged it based on, long-term value to the company, right?
Yeah.
Or on an impression base or a awareness base, that may be a better way to actually judge that particular screen's success or failure.
Got it. One question is that you spoke about funnels, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you must have faced that obvious before. A lot of time designers complain that, we try getting the metrics from analytics, but they never give it to us, or we try getting it from a freelancer would say, I try getting it from the client, but they don't give it to us.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on how you can start extracting metrics, or is there any way that if you don't have some metrics or you can't get access to it, how can you tackle that situation in those cases?
Yeah. I think this is definitely harder when you're working outside a company, right?
Yeah.
As a freelancer or as an agency. Inside a product company, I think that designers probably don't look at metrics enough, but I think they definitely would have access to them if they want to have access to them. There are other proxies, right? Like if you're outside a company, you could do some quick usability testing. Can you take your design to 10 people, right? We found that even just a small sample size of 7 to 10 people, right, will often give you very strong directional data about where people find friction in a process. And, that's where you can target your improvements.
But the same way, I don't think in most cases, we don't recommend for a particular cohort the research to be done for more than 8 to 10 people, because it solves 80% of the purpose, and then everything just goes slightly.
There is a very strong Pareto.
There's a plateau
thing that goes on there.
All right. And Rahul, the last time we were having a conversation on the phone, and you told me something very interesting, which was napkin math. And I want to get deeper into that.
Sure.
So, what is napkin math, firstly, at the very least?
Yeah.
And what does that even mean? And
sure.
Can you give an example on how designers can actually use that in their process?
Sure. So, you flew into Bangalore?
A little bit, yes. I would say that. Yes.
Bangalore,
flew into Bangalore.
Yeah.
Yes.
You probably had a long drive from the airport to the city.
Correct.
Right? It's about 40 kilometers minimum from any point in Bangalore to the airport. Now, there's a very interesting startup came up called Chauffeur. I don't know if you've heard
I heard of them.
Quite early stage at this point in time. Disclosure, I'm an investor. But they had a very interesting realization that the cost per kilometer of an EV is so low that it doesn't matter where in Bangalore you book from, they'll give you a flat rate to the airport.
Oh,
right?
Wow.
So it doesn't really matter whether you're in the southeastern corner of Bangalore or the northwest corner of Bangalore. To the airport, the distance is almost immaterial, right? So, if you just do that kind of like I said, right? If you have a napkin, you literally with a sketch pen can write down, okay, roughly 5 rupees per kilometer for an EV, 16 rupees for a petrol vehicle. The maths does not work out for a petrol vehicle startup like an Uber or an Ola if you're trying to pick somebody up in, let's say, the one corner of Bangalore and take them to the airport. But if you have relatively price insensitive customers, right, people who are willing to pay a slight premium for great service and assured standards of service and an assured pickup and drop, they would prefer your service over anybody else. Right? So they were able to then just price everything the same. So you removed one whole lens of complexity. You didn't need to worry, okay, today is there surge pricing, is there this, is there that, just to a standard fee. And that's the way they expanded, even though there was lots of competition, right? Today you have Uber, you have Ola, you have Blue Smart until recently.
Yeah.
You have, I'm sure, 5 other companies whose names I've forgotten.
Correct.
But Chauffeur was able to use that as a wedge to say, okay, in places where there's a long, repetitive, journey, right, where there were people who were willing to pay a slight premium over any other service, they then went in as a result of this really, really basic maths that, anybody who studied basic arithmetic can kind of.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's just one example where if designers were able to do that, it really, really helps the process.
Yeah. How do you think that impacts? Let's take Chauffeur's example.
Yeah.
Can you tell me, if you knew this napkin math and you knew how to do it, how would it impact maybe your design decisions?
So let's say that, Chauffeur was pricing themselves exactly the way that Uber and Ola were, right?
Yeah.
So, from one end of Bangalore, maybe it was 2,000 rupees versus another where it was 1,200.
Yeah.
But the cost to the company was very, very similar for both of these.
Yeah.
Now, if we were able to pass on that similarity in cost to the end consumer, you remove one lens of complexity, right? You're able to go out with a very, very consistent message to the market and say 1,500 rupees anywhere in Bangalore to the airport. That becomes a differentiator. That becomes something that you can build a brand and a company on, right?
So Rahul, since we are talking about business and design, I want to ask you, how does any designer actually explain the ROI of their work?
So, see, if you have to explain ROI, right, you have to understand the why first of the I, right? Sorry, I sound like Sadhguru, but take care. Why did we make this investment, right? Now, if you just jumped in and, like in our first example, you just redesigned your homepage, right, without asking, what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to communicate our value proposition better? Are we trying to explain how we are differentiated better? Are we trying to, make a first step in a conversion journey easier, right? So we have to first understand exactly why did we actually make this change, or why does the business want to make this change? Why does the company want to make this change, honestly, right? Once you're able to do that, then are you able to measure the before after, right? From there, the ROI is actually a really, really simple number to get to.
Yeah.
If you have if you have version A, which was the older one, you have version B, you know exactly which metric you're trying to influence. You make sure you measure it in a like-to-like way. Now, that, of course, goes out of the designer's hands and is more on, let's say, folks in analytics or whatever it is. Designer has to make sure that they ask the right questions.
Yeah.
Did we measure people who clicked on this button versus people who clicked on this button?
Yeah.
Right? So make sure, because, it's not that the analytics team necessarily also knows the goals that were set out to start with. Make sure that, we articulate, okay, please, I need to measure metric X, Y, and Z, right? That's something that I think we as designers need to also influence in the process. At that point in time, let's say then you show the new version of your homepage to some cohort or to some part of your users, you show the old website to a different cohort. You can very easily measure the delta and then extrapolate over your audience space if you have a large enough group. If you have a small enough group, the nice thing is you can just make the change and just do a pre-post, or you can do a before and after.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that's the way in which you need to go back to the ROI. First, really understand, why are we making this change? What are we trying to influence? Are we measuring the right things, both before and after? If we didn't measure something before, we don't know what the uplift is, or whether it's an uplift or things going worse in the new version. Right? So we need to make sure that teams are aware of these various different things, and then finally do a clean measurement between these two.
Got it. All right, Rahul, I'm gonna.
Yes.
And this is good insight. Before I even go to the next question, it's good insight, because I've seen people constantly, at least on the internet, be like, hey, what is really ROI and how can I even measure it? And that is why I thought this question was very important for you, for you to answer. With that being said, I'm going to talk a little bit about curiosity. One is that designers typically, when they want to understand business, it feels like a pain, I mean, you've been a designer first and then an entrepreneur. You must feel like, hey, what, do I even need to understand these numbers? Because we are not numbers people usually, right? So how do you make a designer be more curious or feel more curious about things like revenue models, or let's say any other business metric, and something that other schools or design schools don't really teach?
I think this is really unfair, to be honest. Most designers that I know, right, especially the ones who went through a design school or so on, often come from an art background.
Correct.
They deliberately chose not to do numbers, right? They're like 10 standard mein, like we have done our maths for life.
Yeah.
Right? And now you're coming and asking me to understand, LTV and CAC and all of these different acronyms, right? I think we really pulled as an industry, it is quite unfair, right, at one level. At the other level, right, I think if you don't understand the other forces that are at play, right, in your company, in the way that either you will be judged by stakeholders or clients, however you want to think about it, or finally your customers, right, then essentially what's happening is you're giving up control over any future designs that happen as well.
Yeah.
Right? Because let's say that, let's go back to example, I redesign a homepage or an app, right? Now, if I did not understand that the goal was to increase conversions, and I just made something that looks great, but maybe it's, very heavy, takes a long time to load, right?
Yeah.
At that point in time, what's going to happen is that somebody from, whether it's your founder, your CEO, your folks from business are going to come say, no, stop doing this. I'll tell you what to do.
Yeah.
At that point, you move from being somebody who's bringing original thought and value to somebody who's just operating a tool. Because they'll be like, nahi, ye icon upar kar lo, thoda bada kar lo, aur ek banner laga lo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? That's the conversation. And that's a conversation you never want to be having, honestly.
Yeah.
Right?
I completely.
So I think if you think about it from, I want to make sure that there's an artistic integrity or a thought that's gone into it. I want to make sure that continues. You'll have to understand, you'll have to do the work to understand the maths as well behind it.
No, that's brilliant. So, Rahul, what I want to know is because you've run Obvious to a certain scale. I want some of your thoughts on your entrepreneurship side of things and how you build Obvious. And this is more for people who are freelancers or aspiring designers who want to probably build their own agency or a small studio setup, however they want to do it. And your thoughts will help. So, the first question that I have is, what is this one piece of non-obvious advice that you would give to any product designer or senior person who wants to start their own venture?
I'd start off by saying don't.
I would also say that. Trust me.
I think, there's a couple of things, right? Basics, get somebody who really understands tax and compliance. Right? Honestly, that's cost us like a lot. It pains me.
Yeah, I can see the pain.
How much money we've lost because of not knowing the nuances of that, being first generation entrepreneurs, etc. Going more specifically to design, I think one thing that surprised me constantly was how our work and our clients got better every time we raised prices.
Oh, wow.
Very
That's a unique one. Very counterintuitive.
For somebody who, I remember when I was starting out, I built a website for this restaurant brand, right? And I charged them 8,000 rupees for the website. They negotiated me down to 6,500. And it took me 3 months. And they had, that many back and forths. This is back in 2007. So it's a while ago, right? Whereas a client who, we would then, later bill, let's say, I don't know, $500,000, right? We'd get like, looks great, right? With our first iterations often. It's just very, very interesting how that works. As designers, we are I think we undervalue ourselves. I think we're scared to increase prices because we're worried that, that'll mean less work coming in. I think if you're genuinely confident about your work, if you've validated that, right? You can't be in this sort of Dunning-Kruger zone where you're like, I'm the best.
Yeah.
Right? Triangulate that. Are you actually adding value? If you are, charge for that. That would be my one piece of advice.
Well, that's very, very true. I think these are both things that we've experienced ourselves. We learned finances a little too late. I wouldn't say a little too late, but we focused on that a little too late. We fortunately did not lose a lot of money, but to actually utilize finance on how business should be run, how business should be grown, that was very, very crucial. And at the same time, we've also felt it that whenever we faced prices, people, more interesting people and people who have a better vision rather also have chosen to work with us. But from my advice, from my thought process, I have a question that if you keep increasing your costs, doesn't that make you more of a studio setup than you wanting to be a very large and a larger company if you want to be 300, 400? I'm just asking you out of curiosity. Isn't that the case?
See, I think the way that agencies grow is not linear. There's a stepped function, right? And I got a very good piece of advice early on where somebody said, you either stay below 50 or you go above 200. In the middle is messy. You don't have any of the advantages of either scale, which is on one end, or of, boutique, high quality craft on the other, right? He called it the teenage years of a design studio, right? You've got like pimples coming out, you've grown taller, but you're, looking really skinny and lanky, right? Your hair's doing really weird things, all of that, right? You're going through puberty. So I would say that, right? Be clear about where you are. You can build a fantastic business doing, doing way, way more money than you ever imagine, I would say, on either end, right? But it's a very, very different kind of business that you have to build. So be clear about who you are. Do you want to run that boutique, let's say 30, 40, 50% company max, we know everybody's name, you know all your clients, etc.? Or do you want to move towards scale?
Yeah.
Right? Be very clear about where you are on that and work quickly to go between 50 and 200 very, very quickly.
Correct. So I think I genuinely understand exactly where you come from. Now that we aim to go from 55 to 75 as a team,
Yeah.
I am worried. With that being said,
I look forward to you being 200.
200. You said that, right? Go there very quickly, and that is what I'm gonna go home and do that now.
Because your culture changes, honestly, right? And cultural change is the hardest to drive, honestly.
Yeah, 100%. We're already seeing some bits and pieces of that cultural change.
And it also changes in a non-intuitive way. The problem is the things that used to work for you will not work for you anymore.
Yeah.
Right? And you have to be comfortable with that. You have to change yourself in some ways to get to that next level of growth. And I'm not saying that growth is for everybody, but if you choose to be there, I would say move through it rapidly.
All right. I'm going to take this one, I'm going to take home from my end. With that being said, Rahul, I've seen a lot of people rant on LinkedIn and talk about, hey, you know what, I work with this ex-client and I faced this problem and they never paid me money, or these were some issues, they never changed their designs on time and never gave me changes, hundreds of things, right? How does a freelancer actually spot a red flag early on in client relationships, and what are some red flags that you've seen?
Yeah, red flags. So many. Where to start? I think extreme price negotiation, right? The best companies, of course, they want to get value for what they're investing. But, to them, a 10% price delta is honestly not going to move the bottom line. And for you, it is, right? For you, it is 10% of your annual revenue. For them, it is just 10% of one small service provider's fees, right? So if you find that, you started X, maybe you come to 60% of X, but somebody who's then trying to squeeze the last, trying to bring you down just because they can, right? That's often a red flag. I think people who know exactly what they want beforehand. If they're like, hey, listen, I want a yellow navigation bar, I want the icons all have to be red, and, I know that this particular size of button will work, but not this.
Yeah.
That person wants a DTP operator.
Yeah.
Or, maybe let's need to coin a term saying Figma operator, right? Maybe we'll have, like back in the 90s, we'll have, shops which say Figma done here kind of thing. Right? Sure, maybe, and maybe that's the right thing for them at that stage of their business as well. But do you want that kind of client? Unclear. Somebody who also, I think an early sign is, and we used to do this, we used to actually do workshops up front where we'd actually ask the client to come in and go back to, the question I started with. Why are you actually doing this?
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's a feature, like your client Jar, run by friends of mine, I know them, really like the company overall. They went from doing savings, right, penny savings or small savings, to launching a jewelry brand, right, Neck, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Why are you doing this? Why do you think this is the right area of adjacency? Did they come to, maybe if they worked with an external vendor or, even the internal team, did they say, hey, listen, we want to launch a jewelry brand? Or did they say, hey, listen, we've got, millions of people using our product, understand us as being synonymous with precious metals. How do we expand into an, alternative adjacency, right? And expand our service offerings to them.
Yeah.
Right? Where did it actually, how did that conversation go? Right? That's often a good leading indicator of what the rest of your engagement will be like.
That indicates a lot of clarity, thought behind the entire business. I think these are similar things that I've seen. For anyone who's starting to build their own studio agency, they want to establish deep trust with their client, which I'm sure you have through all the clients that you work with. How does someone actually do that, at least with their first 2 to 5 projects, maybe?
See, there's a couple of things, right? One is, I would over-index on starts and beginnings, right, of engagements. To start off with, how do you kickstart an engagement, right? I would design that experience, and in fact, we did design that experience for our clients at Obvious, right? Kick off closely knit. Didn't matter whether our clients were Bangalore-based. We've flown to Nigeria for one of our clients, spent a week working with them in person, right? I think small things like that demonstrate an above and beyond. Flight tickets are not expensive, right? And the ROI on that is very, very high, right? If you're also able to give them something that they did not know or did not have very, very rapidly in those 5 days, right? Nothing like it. So for instance, I think the design sprint process, right? Some adaptation of that, where you actually take a ambiguous problem statement, translate into a prototype and validate it and come back with insights in a short time period. That was one of the methods we used to very, very rapidly build trust, right? Second thing is, when you make a mistake, and this is inevitable in whether it doesn't matter whether you're an employee, studio, freelancer, jo bhi hai, right? You are going to mess up at some point in time.
Yeah.
How do you come back from that, right? Do you take ownership of that, right? Too often these days I see people ghosting, clients, employers, managers, whatever it is, right? Maybe that works on the dating apps, not on Figma, right? So own the mistake, show up, have that uncomfortable conversation and fix it, right? I think people really value that because everybody knows that there is going to be a slip up somewhere or the other, right? I think it's really important in how you show integrity at the end of that process.
Well, that's beautiful. I think when you talk about, I have a follow-up question actually. When you spoke about crafting the process of an onboarding as well as towards the start and the end.
Yeah.
I understand the start can be a good sensational start. You can have everything sorted. You can have a project very clear. The expectations were set very clear and all of that. How can the end be made beautiful?
See, 2 ways again, right? One is, like I said, right, there's this theory of the peak end theory. I don't know if you're familiar with that people basically judge an experience based on its peak and then based on how things end, right? And usually the delta between the lowest point and the end is the way that they judge things. So if you check out of a hotel, let's say they gave you, your, room smelled of smoke, right? But if they give you a voucher when you were checking out for a free day the next time, right? You'd probably be like, "Theek hai, chalega," right? Give them a 5-star review on Google or come back to them, which is even more valuable. Here again, right? At some point in time during your engagement, let's say it was a 6-week project or whatever it was, there's going to be a mix, 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Right? There's going to be something that breaks.
Yeah.
How do you actually fix that? How do you go a little above and beyond at the end? We wrapped up a project which was a 4-year-long project, right? A great client, loved them. Of course, had lots of differences of opinion, had places where, they messed up, I would say, had places where we messed up, right? We gave them 2 films at the end, which they could use to then explain the value of their product to anybody, right? Whether it was funders, whether it was, clients, whether it was people who were using the product, right? We made 1 film for them, which did that. I think 7-minute film or something. Costed us a bunch of money, right? Like, let's say 10, 12 lakhs or something like that. And we also made a short 3-minute video which covered the entire 4 years and was just like a goodbye, right? And this was completely out of the brief, out of the budget, not something they'd asked for, right? But I think, and of course, each thing will be different. You can't templatize something like this. But it's incredible, right? Look, we still have very, very strong relationships with those clients. They've actually given us business. One of the metrics we used to track was, what is the percentage of new clients who have been referred to us by an ex-client, right? During the engagement, people would be like, yeah, obvious is difficult. They have too high standards. They're asking too many difficult questions. But then they tell their friends, acha, you want something built? Go to these guys, right? So I think that's a really good way of tracking things.
Well, that's something that we track as well across every business metric. But I think what it means is somewhere personalizing the end to something that they would admire and they would always remember in any way whatsoever.
Add something else. Right? Add something which is well beyond what was asked for.
Yeah.
Right. It probably won't cost you much in context of the entire thing, but it just makes a little...
And in context of the ROI that you'll probably get out of it.
Yeah. And, you need not even think about it. Even a handmade card.
Yeah.
in today's day of emails, right? Get the entire team to just say one line about why they enjoyed working with you as a person. Build that personal touch into things. Really, hits different.
That's really good advice, Rahul. So, Rahul, for someone transitioning into a design manager's role or a design leader's role, what are two things that you would advise they should be aware of?
So I think in a manager role, right? One big shift is that your primary deliverable is not just an outcome, but you are responsible now for a bunch of other people delivering great outcomes. So you have to scale whatever made you successful. You have to pass on that process to everybody that you work with, right? In some sense, you have to replicate yourselves in all of these other people. So it can be a very difficult journey because you may have been great at Figma, but now how do you create 10 people or 8 people who are equally good at Figma, right? You may have been great at building a client relationship or a relationship with another stakeholder. How do you help people who maybe, let's say, like a, classic introverted designer, illustrator or motion designer, right? How do you get them to realize that they need to build relationships, and that's actually the way for them to become successful. Right? That's one part. When you become a design leader, I think the gap or the thing becomes a little bit harder because often you move away from craft, right? The thing that is now your deliverable entirely, like as a manager, sure, you want to scale people, but you're still responsible for some impact. But as a design leader, right, your only deliverable is bringing the right people in, making sure that they're working on the right thing, and creating the right environment for them to flourish, right? So, like for instance, I mean, it's a joke, but it's a reality as well. My team has not given me access to Figma, right? Like, so I got really annoyed the other day because my, somebody in the engineering team has access to Figma and was making exports, and I only have comment access. I was like, how is this acceptable, right? But the reality is that, if I'm in Figma, if I'm moving around layers, if I'm reorganizing the file, because sometimes I look at people's Figma organization, I'm like, I want to shoot somebody. Yeah, if you're in Figma, it's a red flag for you as a leader as well.
Yeah, of course. Well, that's very interesting. I completely get it. I have a question. And do you have an understanding, Rahul, on when someone should choose to become an IC, an individual contributor, or go into pursue the management side of the roles?
I feel like 8 out of 10 times, regardless of the circumstances, the right answer is to stay an IC, right?
Okay.
I know, slightly controversial, but I think design needs fewer managers and needs more people who are deeply invested in the craft, right? You don't need as many people telling a team where to go, right? Rough ratio 1:10, more than enough. If you have a 80-member team, you probably need 6 or 7 managers at best, right? Too many people, I think, go into management just because it's the way to build a career, right? I think as design leaders, we need to create better career ladders for ICs to enable somebody who just wants to be great at craft, right? I think that also, with a lot of the things that are happening in the industry, that's also probably a much more foolproof way to keep your career secure long term. Right? Staying as an IC, staying close to craft, staying close to impact and the products, rather than becoming a people manager per se.
But designers typically have this fear that, and not just designers, maybe this is a question across industry, that if I am a person who's not managing other people, I am not doing justice or I'm not doing well.
So find a company that prioritizes ICs, like PhonePe, and Obvious in the past, and possibly Pineapple.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I think, honestly, that is, even, jokes apart, I think that is a sign, that is a leading indicator that this company is probably also going to be successful long term, right? Where there's fewer layers of management. You'll also see this across the industry. Middle management is getting thinned out, right? There's a bigger emphasis on people who are able to actually push the industry forward. I think we've done a lot of incremental work, we're looking for people who can make those step changes today in the industry. Those are the people who will be long-term relevant.
Got it. That's interesting. I think, Rahul, so quickly to conclude the podcast, some chop questions, some things that you need to answer in a word or in a line. All right?
Ready.
Okay, perfect. So, Rahul, what's the one app that you open every morning, the first thing?
My calendar.
Okay.
Yeah. Fantastical. Shout out.
All right. What's the one app or a product that you wish you had built?
Lego or Ather, electric scooters.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
All right. What's that one thing that your team dislikes about you?
There's a lot to choose from. Fact that I change my mind a lot.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
What's that one thing in the design industry or one design myth that you would like to debunk here today?
That design is very important.
All right. Very, very thoughtful. With that being said, thank you so much, Rahul, for being here. Really appreciate you taking the time traveling and making some time for not just us, but for everyone, in all honesty. Thank you again.
Thanks for having me.